Xuan will blow your enemies' minds, and today I'm gonna tell you how to build her best and evaluate her value in the modern day. Let's get into it. What are Diviner Fu's best relics all around? Well, there's only one clear goal within her kit. She has the highest base HP in the game, sitting at 1,474 HP. Only Jingliu barely comes close. And her whole kit centers around eating your team's damage, with all her damage sponge-centric abilities scaling on HP. So building for bulk with high HP will be your best bet. There's a few relic sets which can achieve this. You'll immediately want to turn to 2-piece Guard of Wuthering Snow. Wuthering? Wuthering Waves? This reduces the damage taken by the wearer by 15%. This 2-piece is especially effective if you were to taunt Lightcone on Fu Xuan. You ideally want Fu Xuan to take most of the team's hits, even with there being a damage sponge. This is so she can get more energy and cast bursts more often, which results in more team healing too. Preservations also wield the highest taunt value in the game, with Fu Xuan resting at a lofty 150 taunt value. She quashes the second highest taunt in the game, being Destructions, which for example, Blade would have a taunt value of 125. So never change 2-piece Wuthering Waves, that should be a constant. Don't bother with the 4-piece because its effects require you to be below 50% HP. This will rarely ever happen, due to 1, Fu Xuan's sheer bulk, and 2, even if you do end up in that situation, she will persevere with her huge self-healing. 2-piece Longevue Disciple will be your next best bet. 20% HP is a blessing and should be appreciated. 2-piece Wuthering with 2-piece Longevue will be your bulkiest bet yet, but you can also opt for 2-piece Hackerspace. This allows Fu Xuan some speed to generate some more energy for your team. But all of these 2 pieces are viable and solid. 2-piece Longevue with 2-piece Hackerspace also works nicely. When it comes to full 4-piece sets, there isn't really any that benefits Fu Xuan or her team that much. 4-piece Hackerspace is worthless since it can't proc. The ultimate would have to buffer teammates to do that. Healing them doesn't count because the ult healing is tied to your A4. 4-piece Longevue works on paper, especially since Fu Xuan will be getting hit quite a bit, but that damage is not her goal in the slightest. Crypt should be ignored on her, so don't bother. As for 2-piece sets, Broken Keel is the all-rounder that will work for almost every team you slot this universal sustain in. A really good increase to your teams and should be your go-to. The extra effect res is also nice. The only time it isn't is when you want to use a dot team, where Keel falls off. In that case, use 2-piece Fleet of the Ageless. Fleet works in all of our teams as well. Don't underestimate attack percent, it's a great buff to have. But it especially shines here within DOT teams since they adore attack buffs. Do know that Fleet has also got the added benefit of giving Fu Xuan 12% more HP, so this is also your best bet bulk-wise. However, if you are running Mono Quantum with Zilla or Qingque, 2-piece Penacony becomes an option. But that raises the question of how much better is this over Broken Keel? Well, numbers-wise, have a look. I'd say if you have Penacony pieces from your time farming Glamoth, then yes, this is worth your time to use. Otherwise, Keel will service you well after all. Crypt makes the world go round. Von Wank is pretty bad, hear me out. Yes, the 5% DR is nice and elevates the speed of your healing. Outside of that, 40% advance forward does nothing for her in particular, so leave this in the dust. Balabog of the Architects provides no stats Fu Xuan scales on, but it can be used as artificial bulk thanks to the 15% def increase. I'd swap this for Fleet at your soonest notice though. Main stats are simple, go for HP percent, speed, ERR percent. An HP percent rope is a fine placeholder until you get an ERR rope. For those wondering, is triple HP Fu Xuan viable? After all, her skill duration works like raw maze. The more Fu Xuan moves, the faster her skill runs out, so theoretically a slower Fu Xuan would be bulkier, right? Well, no, and here's why. The more Fu Xuan moves, the more energy she gets from using her skill and ult, not to mention her lovely A2 which also aids in juicing her up. This means more healing overall, and on the whole, better sustain. Plus she will regain her talent effect faster. If you can't hit Fu Xuan's ideal speed breakpoint, which I'll move on to in a second, then it works as a placeholder build for your Diviner. Otherwise, always try to opt for speed as you'll get more sustaining efficiency out of that. Sub-stat priority is very simple. Go for this. Even without Broken Keel, don't sleep on Effect Res because it's a fairly useful stat for your sustain to have on the whole, but it does get better with Keel. Get at least 30% for Keel situations. As for speed breakpoints, there's 3 key ones you can work towards. 134, 143, and 160. I'd say 143 is a healthy amount, but 134 still serves you very well, and if you can somehow manage 160, then Godspeed to you. I'll show myself out. Anyways, HP breakpoints. So I wouldn't stress too much about diminishing returns. The more you get out of something, the less it begins to benefit you. Here's the difference in A4 team-wide healing between a Fu Xuan with 7,000 HP and a Fu Xuan with 8,000 HP. Trust me, you'll be fine after the 6,000 mark, but building more upon that is always welcome. Fu Xuan is not hard to build for, so getting huge HP stats should not be a difficult task to accomplish. Have there been any major changes to Fu Xuan's Lightcone choices? Let's take a look. Since Fu Xuan is an older character, I'd like to start with a new technique she has gained in recent times, wearing trend of the universal market in Acheron teams. This allows Fu Xuan to aid Acheron in gaining more stacks for her burst thanks to applying DOT with his Lightcone. The defense percent is also nice artificial bulk for her, even if she has no personal scaling off of it. Superimposing it also raises the base chance to apply burn by 20% from S1, meaning that the more copies you get, the more reliable her source of Acheron stacks becomes. The only true shame is that this Lightcone has no further taunting effects. For those wondering about the two new preservation Lightcones which were added, Destiny's Threads and Concert for 2, Concert should be ignored as it's damage oriented and Fu Xuan physically cannot provide shields, so the passive is voided. Destiny's Threads is in a position where, theoretically, yes, you can use the passive, but it's useless on Fu Xuan as she doesn't naturally build def and doesn't deal damage as her main kit focus. Outside of trend, Fu Xuan hasn't gained many new Lightcone options that focus on team synergies. She Shut Her Eyes is still her all-rounder best in slot after all. It was tailor-made for Fu Xuan's kit. Free stats with more ERR being super appreciated, now she can fire off bursts more frequently. But that isn't the end of her healing capabilities. She also heals every team member for 80% of their lost HP at the start of every new enemy wave. So if you're at wave 1 out of 2 and your teammates are almost nearly decrepit and dead, once they survive till wave 2 out of 2, Fu Xuan will have healed them all by a chunky amount. Also, when Fu Xuan gets hit, she buffs everyone's damage dealt by 9% to S1. What a Lightcone! It's really good for her and her team, expanding her to have some abundance-like qualities, but that doesn't mean you need this Lightcone specifically. I also want to draw some attention to my personal favorite Fu Xuan choice, Landau's choice. Fu Xuan is more likely to be hit, which means more energy goes her way for more net healing. Love that. Plus, at S5, all damage she takes is reduced by 24%. This Lightcone really assists her roll as a damage sponge, and even if you only have it at S1, I seriously recommend it. Fantastic Lightcone. Moment of Victory I also like for a similar reason. It gives Fu Xuan a higher taunt value. The defense percent is extra artificial bulk, and while Fu Xuan doesn't scale off of it, 48% is no chump amount of def percent. Texture of Memories gives Fu Xuan no specific stats which you like, though the effect rise is cool and is a nice bonus for kill users. But it still centers around Fu Xuan being granted a shield and taking less damage overall, so for a free-to-play option I think Textures is pretty solid. I would avoid using Inherently Unjust Destiny. It may have Destiny in its name, but it certainly isn't Fu Xuan's fate to use this Lightcone. 40% def is good, but Victory gives 48% and can be obtained through free means. Fu Xuan physically cannot trigger the rest of his Lightcone's passive, and there isn't a single follow-up attack in her whole kit, so ignore this one. I would also skip over This Is Me for the similar reason of it being more damage oriented, and while Fu Xuan can at least trigger that cone's passive, it's not beneficial to your usual playstyle at all. We Are Wildfire isn't totally terrible and is worth considering. Damage reduction for the whole team is valuable, and healing everyone based on the wearer's HP, well, that certainly isn't a problem for Fu Xuan. Plus, you can get it for free, so yes, free-to-plays, this is a nice choice. Day 1 of My New Life is alright. Artificial bulk is added with defense percent, and all-type res is actually quite a good effect. I do think Landau's choice of the free option Textures is better than this though. As for freestar Lightcones, defense is the one that I'd recommend, easy to S5 and restores the wearer's HP after they use their ult, and unlike some other freestar Lightcones, the effects aren't single use only, so use this to your heart's content. I don't like Amber for the same reason I don't like 4-piece Wuthering. Fu Xuan will almost never be below 50% HP to activate the passive. Pioneering works on paper, but Fu Xuan will almost never be the one consistently breaking enemies, so the passive is unreliable. Just choose defense. Also, it's called defense, but it restores HP, while the two others are def-based. Huh? Anyways, whose fate shall be told by Fu Xuan in battle? Well, she's a sustain for starters. Put her anywhere and she'll cook. For specific synergies, I would say Mono Quantum is the immediate one that comes to mind. This team consists of Sailor Qingque, Silver Wolf, Sparkle, and Fu Xuan, the game's only true mono team. She has natural synergy here since she's the strongest available sustain for the job, sorry Lynx, and also has very mild buffing capabilities. She fits the bill for a strong quantum sustain to act as the 4th slot so that Silver Wolf's RNG doesn't make you want to pull your hair out. Plus, a nice bonus is that you also get full access to Sparkle's team-wide attack buff. As for synergizing with the specific units in this team, she really is just a great damage sponge. She doesn't really have qualities in particular that make Sailor or Qingque go wild. I suppose skill point efficiency, but with Sparkle around that's not a big deal. Good Fu Xuan specific team though, worth a try if you have all the tools, and it's also the only team where Silver Wolf feels truly viable. You can also put her on trend in Acheron teams like I said earlier. This way Acheron can gain more stacks to burst, and you have a very strong sustain while she's at it. This is nice, since most sustains don't really have any extra effects for Acheron, Aventurine's Burst being the only ever obvious choice outside of Gallagher. but I'd argue that Fu Xuan is faster of helping Acheron out, since she will get hit more often, have a chance to provide a stack every time, whereas Aventurine can only provide an extra stack maybe once or twice a cycle. Outside of that, yeah, use Fu Xuan literally anywhere you can dream of. DOT? Sure, just acknowledge that crit buffing is kinda whatever here. Remember to use Fleet over Keel for extra juicy DPS. Fu Hua teams? Sure, Aventurine is better in my opinion, but Fu Xuan can still help with her mild buffing and is excellent sustain for the job. Your team will still perform excellently with her around, and she takes less skill points than Aventurine too, which is nice. Jingliu teams? Yep, she'll do just fine. The damage sponge is appreciated as always. Same goes for Imbibe or Lunate teams. There's nothing that this fun-sized pink person can't do. Interchangeable into quite literally any team in the game. But I can imagine some concerns being raised for characters like Blade and Clara. For Blade, I think Fu Xuan won't be an issue. Position Fu Xuan on your team next to Blade so that blast attacks will still give Blade a stack. Blade doesn't have a taunt within his kit, but any form of HP loss still builds up his talent stacks. I would say that if you want to be really precautious, avoid taunt Lightcones on Fu Xuan within Blade teams. Most of the time, enemies in higher floors of MOC use attacks which blast more than one teammate, so it shouldn't be a major concern, also especially in pure fiction. Call these two the Glass Cannon and number 8, Fu Xuan duo, since Watch Mojo was clearly onto something. As for Clara, yeah, I'm gonna suggest use a different sustain, namely Lynx or March, because Fu Xuan will take up most hits, and you want Clara to be sustaining those blasts for the sake of her own kit functions. Other than that, you will have pretty much no issue with Fu Xuan soaking up most of your team's hits. In fact, more often than not, it'll be appreciated. What about her modern day value versus the other key sustains? Well, I think she outclasses Luocha pretty easily. He's still a good healer which can remove big buffs off of your opposing enemies, and he'll still function perfectly fine if you're in need of a unit to keep you alive. The Fu Xuan is just all around better, bulkier, and Luocha, scaling off of attack, can't handle nukes that well. Fu Xuan can. He's getting increasingly more frustrating to play against high damaging foes, and Fu Xuan, simply by having HP scaling, beats out Luocha in most scenarios, in my humble opinion. With Huohu, I think if you already have Huohu and another 5-star sustain, Fu Xuan's value drops significantly. If it's an Acheron issue, at that stage just use Gallagher instead of pulling an entirely new 5-star just to use a specific Lightcone on her. I think that 2-piece Pentacle near Huohu is also much stronger than Fleet Fu Xuan in DOT teams, since Black Swan gets a really nice damage increase from Huohu in that way, with her attack buffing making up for not using Fleet. Plus, since Huohu has energy restore in her kit, you get more Kafka bursts, which means more DOT detonations, so I think Huohu is a better unit than Fu Xuan. But Fu Xuan outclasses Immortal Quantum, of course, and if you only have Huohu and over 5-star sustain, picking up Fu Xuan will be an unkillable duo for both halves of MOC. Then Aventurine. He can use Trend if that's what you're thinking, and he's also better in the follow-up team with more consistent effect res than Fu Xuan, also having some meaningful damage contributions within his best installed team. He's also equally as flexible as Fu Xuan in my opinion. Plus, he adds better weakness coverage to DOT teams since he attacks more frequently. Sustain-wise, I think Fu Xuan's sustaining is more skill point efficient, and it's also just, well, bulkier, but I also think her sustaining can be a bit overkill, whereas Aventurine's is more well-tuned to the current content in the game. If you have Japard, he's honestly really solid for a standard unit and is still a great 5-star sustain. If you had him already, Swarm and other high damaging content will still be no issue for you. I'd even make the bold claim that he's better than Luocha in my opinion, so no need to pull Fu Xuan as a deliberate upgrade, but I do prefer that Fu Xuan's sustain source is on demand with her skill as opposed to needing to charge up a burst to fire it off. Here's what I think. Evaluate the teams you're using and think, what does Fu Xuan specifically add to my teams? If you only have one of these 5-star sustains, yeah, get her, she's still amazing, but her value drops off a lot if you already have the others. Yes, she's worth replacing Luocha over. No, she's not worth replacing the other 3 over. And the best of these 3 is Huohu, but others may beg to differ and argue Aventurine, which is also valid. Alright, you've come this far and decided whether you're committing or not. If you're still all in for Pink Xiao, then let's delve into how her traces work. So, how does Fu Xuan work? Her basics are, well, she just does some single target quantum damage to an enemy. What's nice is that it scales off of her HP, so whoa, like 100 extra damage or something. Life-changing. Her skill is much cooler. She activates Matrix of Prescience with it. All teammates will distribute a percentage of the damage they take, scaling off of trace level to Fu Xuan for 3 turns. The duration of this works the same as Wan Mei's skill. This is before the damage is mitigated by any heals, so if damage is taken, that damage will then eat away at the shield you may have on Fu Xuan, instead of accounting for the fact that you have a shield when calculating the HP loss. The only time this will matter is if you're playing double sustain in Swarm Disaster. During her skill, everyone gets an HP increase based on a percentage of Fu Xuan's own HP, and a mild crit rate buff. If she dies, her skill effects will also cease to exist. As for her ult, it deals quantum damage to your enemies scaling off of Fu Xuan's HP. It also restores 1 trigger count of her talent healing, which we'll look at right now. Her talent is also pretty great. While she's on field, all allies would take less damage while Fu Xuan is there. The percentage scales on trace level. When she falls below 50%, she will restore a huge percentage of her HP scaling on trace level. Visibility is 1 trigger count on its own and can have up to 2 trigger counts during a battle. Also, if she receives a killing blow, she won't survive on 1 HP and heal herself, she'll just kick the bucket. As for Ascension passives, A2's cool. If you use Fu Xuan's skill, when her current skill effects are still up, she'll gain 20 extra energy for doing so. It's nice if you need her ult for emergency healing. Her A4 is where the team-wide healing kicks in. She heals all allies by 5% of her own HP, plus a flat amount of 133. Her A6 is crazy though. While her skill is up, teammates will resist a crowd control debuff applied to them 1 time. For example, if Kafka tries to dominate one of your enemies, they go Chab mode and say nope. Then they become susceptible to CC again after avoiding getting CC'd once. But when you recast her skill, this can be activated again, so this is basically on-demand CC avoidance. How about her trace priorities? Well, a little simple. Level her skill first since it's the main meat of our kit, and make sure you keep that talent well oiled as well. I personally would ignore her burst trace level since damage doesn't matter on her and it won't affect her trigger count restoration, but it's there if you want it. And don't level up her basics or else Fu Xuan will witness a future ahead of you full of lost 50-50s and bad decisions made. The bad decision in question being leveling her basics for no reason. Speaking of bad decisions, how about going into debt? Sounds like fun? Great, then let's talk Eidolons. E1 gives Fu Xuan some buffing capabilities. While her skill is up, everyone gains 30% extra crit damage. Good E1 for most teams, barring DOT comps. I think Aventurine's E1 is this but better though. Keep that in mind when choosing which sustain you want to invest into. If anyone gets hit by a killing blow, Fu Xuan will keep them alive and then heal them for 70% of their HP. This can only happen once per battle, don't get this on its own. It's extremely overkill if you're dying that much with an E0 Fu Xuan, and there's a larger problem at hand here. Levels both her skill and talent by +2, good increases but not necessary, don't pick this up on their own. Whenever teammates get attacked during Fu Xuan's skill, Fu Xuan gains 5 energy. This is great for more consistent team-wide healing, but once again, E0 is really enough sustain already, dare I say overkill at times. Levels for alt and basic by +2, I don't even think I have to say, don't get this unless you're going for E6. When Fu Xuan activates your skill, a tally is started. It keeps track of all the HP your teammates lose, and Fu Xuan's ultimate damage will increase by 200% of the amount of HP everyone has lost. So let's say your team loses 10k HP total, Fu Xuan will deal 200% of that in her next ult. This tally caps at 120% of Fu Xuan's own max HP, and the tally will begin resetting again after Fu Xuan's first ult use. I'd say at this stage use a quantum damage % orb on her, and you can aim for more crit stats if you get this. But for an E6, I'll be totally honest, there is better out there. All of Fu Xuan's Eidolons are super overkill and don't feel worthwhile on their own. If you get lucky in the E1, that's great, otherwise don't go beyond that. I'd say if you want to invest in Fu Xuan more, get her Lightcone first and foremost, then pick up E1 for the buffing. Low spenders, stop there because anything beyond that is whale territory, and I consider Fu Xuan to be a go big or go home character, E1 or E6, no in between with her. Even to this day, Fu Xuan is still a powerful sustaining pick for all your staying alive needs. While she does have more competition now and is more skippable in the modern day, I don't think she's a bad pickup. Especially nice to get if you're a quantum enjoyer, and if you own her already, I think she will continue to serve us just fine as a high quality sustain for months and possibly years to come. I expect her to be good for at least another year, seeing as she's still got good standing in the meta currently. Hopefully this guide was able to teach you how to cut the fates short of Fu Xuan's enemies. This has been Juice, signing out. And if you close your eyes...